We are continuing our spring outlooks, guys. Episode 206 of Pigskin Frenzy. In the year of our Lord 2025, we are ready to rock and roll with some spring outlooks. I'm so excited. And we just got done doing Florida State, Purdue, Indiana, and Ole Miss this past Thursday. We continue on with some more spring outlooks and continue our spring football coverage here on Pigskin Frenzy. I'm really pumped because we have some rivalries, but I mean, I would say for at least on the SEC side of things, a huge rivalry, and then an interstate rivalry between two teams. We're going to cover all of these teams. South Carolina, Clemson, Alabama, and LSU are the teams we are talking about and giving our spring outlooks on right here on Pigskin Frenzy. Guys, welcome to Pigskin Frenzy on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joel North. Whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, listening on Podbean and Apple, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple, all you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. X and Instagram at pigskin_frenzy. Follow, like the pages there. You're going to get news and highlights from across college football. You're going to get trivia questions on Instagram stories. Go and answer today's college football question as well as all things of the date for Pigskin Frenzy. Guys, there's the website, www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. There's a home and about me page. Learn more about me as your podcast host. There's a contact info down below. You can contact me with a name, email, question. I'll answer it on air or off air if need be. There's a store, affiliations, more on that coming soon. There is also a platforms page. All the platforms I just mentioned, go and click on which one's your favorite listening style of the show. That and more coming up to date and coming soon on www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. Guys, we are ready to rock and roll with some spring football coverage and our spring outlooks. We dove deep into our spring outlooks this past Thursday, and we talked about, like I said, Florida State, Purdue, Indiana, Ole Miss, but we also talked about spring football, the pros and cons of having spring football, but also and as we keep going with spring outlooks, you're going to think, Joel, there's more and more schools canceling their spring games. But here's the kicker. They're still having spring practices. We can get into that. We can dive deep into the spring practices, dive deep into leverage, how they're doing in their spring practices, what positions they need to change, what stance needs to change for this team, what needs to be done about this. What are they doing great heading into the 2025 season in fall camp? All that stuff for spring football, and you evaluate everything. Spring football is something that you need to monitor, whether it's games or no games, whether it's practices or no practices, just the games. It doesn't matter. You monitor everything. And it's very important heading into the 2025 season now more than ever to have spring practice and spring football in general. The real reason why a lot of these guys are canceling their games or not televising their spring football games and switching everything up to a more OTA style approach or just not televising their spring games in general is because of the transfer portal coming up in the spring and tampering and poaching people out of the portal. So I understand the reasoning, but the con of everything is a lot of people don't get to experience a big, real simulated game time situation like they will this coming up fall. So I think that's the con of not having a spring game, but also the pro about not having a spring game is that right there. There's a lot of factors into it. I already gave you my thoughts on it. I can give you more of my thoughts on X or Instagram. I can post it on a video maybe. If you want to hear my thoughts more on the show, you are more than welcome to just kind of just press the bear a little bit. Say, hey, Joel, we want to hear more about your thoughts on them canceling spring football games and just taking that away. But nonetheless, on this slate of teams and on this slate of games, there's only one team that is not having their annual spring football game. We're going to talk about that one here last because it's very, very interesting. Let's start in the SEC, then we're going to go to the ACC, then back to the SEC for our final two schools. But let's start with the SEC, and let's go to Columbia, South Carolina, and talk about the South Carolina Gamecocks. Finishing their season strong, they went to the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. Did they lose? Yes, they lost to Illinois, but they are looking to kick off their 2025 spring and their 2025 or heading into the 2025 season with a lot of momentum, trying to be a dark horse contender for the college football playoff entering 2025. They have a lot of talent coming back, including Lenora Sellers at quarterback. We are very, very intrigued by him. We're going to be, it's a big, intriguing game in the SEC and heading into college football. You also have Dylan Stewart coming back on the edge. Kennard is out, and he is now in the NFL or going to the NFL. You got Dylan Stewart back with the team. You also, have Nick. You also have Mazeo Bennett Jr. at receiver. You got guys, like Nick Harbor at 6'5", junior, 235-pound wide receiver back for the Gamecocks. You have Wendell Gregory, redshirt freshman, coming in for South Carolina. There's a lot of talent on this football team that can, make a big impact for Shane Beamer's team heading into 2025. We have our questions, though, obviously, and what we're excited about and what we want to see out of South Carolina in the spring. And for South Carolina, we thought, heading into 2024, before we get into our spring outlook on South Carolina, before heading into 2024, we thought South Carolina was a middle-of-the-road SEC team or a little bit more below. They shocked us all. They won a lot. They won games, more games than we didn't really expect them to. They made it to the Citrus Bowl, and while they did lose, they went 9-4. They still made it to the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. I was kind of shocked that they made it into that bowl game, and they won games that we weren't supposed to win. They really weren't supposed to win. They lost to LSU close. They lost to Alabama by the hair of their chin. They beat Texas A&M in a big-time game. The only really significant blowout loss they had was against Ole Miss. They beat Missouri. They beat Vanderbilt. They beat a lot of teams that they destroyed Oklahoma. They blew out Oklahoma. There was a lot of teams that they weren't supposed to win against, and they did. Some games that they were supposed to lose against, they did lose, but it was very, very close, and they almost upset a couple of teams. This team could have won 11 games, could have been in the playoffs if some of these results would have been changed. They beat Clemson in their in-state rivalry. It was a huge showdown there in Death Valley and Clemson Memorial Stadium behind Lenora Sellers' amazing 300-plus total yard game in Clemson, South Carolina. Huge game for him, and they went to the Citrus Bowl. They lost to Illinois. It was a very kind of a, they ended up surprising a lot of people last year. And now this year, they're going in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. The hype is a little bit there, and a lot of them are expecting them to be, at least in the top 20 or top 15 heading in the preseason polls in August. And they're also expecting them to make a play for the college football playoff entering December of 2025. Will they? I don't know. I do not know, but I am very intrigued about the prospect of South Carolina being a dark horse team entering the 2025 season. So let's give you our spring outlooks on South Carolina and what we expect and what I kind of want to see from them heading into the spring. Let's talk about the number one thing, running backs. I want to see what they're going to do with running back, and that's the number one point on our outlook for spring football for South Carolina. I want to see what they're going to do at the running back spot. Raheem Sanders, gone. You do have that running ability with Lenora Sellers. I understand that. But you got to have a pure running back in the backfield to carry the load off of Lenora Sellers. So who is going to be that guy and fill that void, right? Yes, a big pickup here. You do... Excuse me, as I'm going here, you do have Rahul Faison. Coming in from Utah State as a graduate transfer. You do have a big-time grad transfer running back there who could most likely can get the nod and be a replacement for Raheem Sanders heading into this year. You got him there. He could be a good option for you at running back. I'm kind of curious to see what he does as that grad transfer, for the team. You also have, like I said, Lenora Sellers carrying that load. But honestly, if you want to look, at more running backs for the team and more guys coming in at running backs for the team, you got Jaron Howell, the redshirt sophomore here behind Faison and behind Rahul Faison there. You got him. There's more there's really more. You got Nathan Harris Waynick, the redshirt senior. You got a lot. You got those three guys I just named at the running back spot for South Carolina. So if you look at the roster there, you got the grad transfer out of Utah State with Fison. You got Nathan Harris Waynick. You got, excuse me, you got Jawarn Howell. You got a lot of guys at the running back spot that could help out Lenora Sellers in the ground game. Is it going to have some of that explosiveness like we saw at Rocket Sanders? Maybe not, but it could be if you play him enough and you keep using him enough, and you have that three-headed dragon or four-headed dragon on the ground game if you count Lenora Sellers. So what's going to happen at running back? I'm curious to see who replaces Raheem Sanders at running back, and what are you going to do at running back, and who's going to take that leap in the running game for South Carolina. That's number one for them. Lenora Sellers is a good passer, but I want to see him take a more of a huge leap as a passer. And that's my number 2 point heading into the spring for South Carolina. I think that he is a good quarterback. I think he's a good thrower, and I've seen him launch a football. He is a great runner. I think in some of the big-time moments, he had a lot of, and this is kind of maybe an unpopular opinion for a lot of people, you're going to think he did throw the ball a lot, and he did throw the ball. But when it comes to running the football, he is, lights out. He's a better runner, right? I want to see him throw the ball a lot better and a lot more than running the football. I want to see some of it bleeds into the first point I had, right? I think the guys I just mentioned and the names I just mentioned, Fison, Harris Warnick, and then you got Warrant, and if you got those three guys there, I want to see if those three guys can take the pressure off, and then that brings me to my second point. Let Lenora Sellers showcase his throwing ability more. I want to see how well he can throw the ball, make accurate decisions through the air, and make timely decisions and make timely passes to his receivers. I want to see Lenora Sellers throw the ball and elevate his throwing game in the spring. I think that's my second point. Can Lenora Sellers elevate his throwing ability there? I'm curious about that, and I really, really want to see I want to see that for in the throwing game for their offense in Mike Shula's offense heading into the 2025 season and heading into this spring, right? So that's number 2 point for me. Here is the third and final point for South Carolina for me on my spring outlook to conclude South Carolina spring outlook. The edge. We got Dylan Stewart. Yes, we have Dylan Stewart. I understand that. I think you have Dylan Stewart there. You do as the edge sophomore. He's going to be a big-time playmaker for this team. As a sophomore, he's got 2 more. He's got this year, then next year after for South Carolina. That's a dangerous thing to think about, right? You got him there. I want to see, and this is just for me, I want to see who else steps up besides Dylan Stewart and on the edge spot. You also have Wendell Gregory at redshirt freshman. I think that could be a good name there coming in there. You got Desmond, Yumo Lazulu. You got Yuma Lazulu, Desmond Yuma Lazulu. You got Wendell Gregory. You got Dylan Stewart. I want to see who steps up, and some of the younger players could even step up on the edge. Just replace Kyle Kennard there. I want to see who helps out Dylan Stewart on the edge. I think those are some good names that I just mentioned there. Besides Dylan Stewart, you also can bring in Jaquavius Dodd, freshman, 6'6", 245 pounds, coming in as a freshman for South Carolina. You can play him a little bit on the edge as well. Now, you're going to play the other 2 guys also, but if you want to have a rotating out and rotate in and help out Stewart a little bit, Dodd can be a name that you can throw in there. So who's going to help out Dylan Stewart on the edge there? That's pretty much my spring outlook for South Carolina. Number 1, who's going to step up in the running game to carry that load off of Lenora Sellers running the football now that Raheem Sanders is gone? Number 2, can Lenora Sellers, taken away from that, from bleeding off the first point? The second point is, can he elevate his throwing game? I want to see him throw the ball a little bit better and elevate his throwing game and be more of a throwing quarterback as well. He can still run the ball, don't get me wrong. Run it when you have a design run or when you need to scramble, but throw the ball a lot. Throw the ball a lot more. And then number 3, who helps out Dylan Stewart on the edge? I want to see if you can get the new young freshman Jaquavius Dodd in there, as he is very, very talented for this game. He could be very talented for this Gamecocks defense. That is my spring outlook for for the South Carolina Gamecocks. And for South Carolina, their spring game is April 18th. Spring game's on April 18th. Their head coach is Shane Beamer. Offensive coordinator Mike Shula and defensive coordinator Clayton White all there coaching up this team. Spring game's on April 18th. Don't know if it's televised or not. I don't think it's televised, but their spring game's on April 18th. Tune in and check out and go support your Gamecocks here in the spring as we get ready for the 2025 college football season. That's my outlooks on South Carolina. Let's move on to the ACC really quick. We're going to have more ACC spring outlooks because we had a lot of teams that we're going to talk about as well as we continue our month and a half going into early May coverage of spring football here. And this is going to be a pretty lengthy few weeks of spring football on Pigskin Frenzy. So you're going to get tired pretty much of spring football content. I hope not, but we're talking about different teams each and every week. So keep on plugging in on all platforms, X and Instagram, and on YouTube, Podbean, Spotify, Apple, and Amazon for all things Pigskin Frenzy. Let's dive into the ACC. This is a very interesting case. Clemson, the defending ACC champions, South Carolina's rivalry. Clemson is a very interesting case in the ACC, coming off of an ACC championship win that they weren't even supposed to be in and projected to be in. They got help from Syracuse. So thank you, Syracuse, for helping Clemson get into the ACC championship game and to beat SMU, and then they not only went to the ACC championship, Syracuse helped them also get into the college football playoff. So thank you there as well. Coming off of that and coming off of a first round loss from the playoffs, Clemson is ready to rock and roll in the 2025 season. There was significant development from senior quarterback Cade Klubnik. And this was a year ago last spring in March. We had a spring outlook on Clemson. I said, I want to see what's happening with Cade Klubnik. I want to see Cade Klubnik develop a lot more. Did he develop? Yes, he did. He developed quite tremendously, I think, than a lot of other quarterbacks in the 2024 year. I think Cade Klubnik developed tremendously. He showed off some of his legs when needed, and he made some good, accurate decisions. He used a lot of his head and his mind in some of these plays, and I was really a big fan of it. I think Cade Klubnik has a shot at being one of the best and underrated quarterbacks heading in to the 2026 NFL draft class, and I'm not joking when I say that. I think he can do some damage in the 2025 season this coming up year in college football. Cade Klubnik, his development was really, really good. I want to see him go above and beyond heading into the 2025 season. We can talk about that here in a little bit. Their spring game, Clemson's spring game, is on April 5th. They moved it earlier, so it's in a couple of weeks. In about 2 or 3 weeks is their spring game. So after that, they will not have any more spring ball. So we'll get to their spring results here in April, but no more spring practice after that. They are currently in spring practice, as is South Carolina. Head coach Dabo Swinney, offensive coordinator Garrett Riley, and defensive coordinator, now for defensive coordinator, Tom Allen from Penn State, a big-time hire, hiring Tom Allen from Penn State, going to Clemson. That's going to elevate their defense and bring their defense back to where it was, and I am excited to see that. And I think that's going to be a big hire for Clemson. That's going to be probably one of the best hires in college football. I mean, Jim Knowles going to Penn State was good, but look, Tom Allen going to Clemson is going to help the Tigers out a lot in the 2025 year. So, without any further ado, let's talk about Clemson's spring outlook, and let's give our points for Clemson. Number one, and we're going to go straight to that defense. Let's see what that defense does under Tom Allen. I'm curious to see how Tom Allen's going to set the foundation of that Clemson defense. That Clemson defense wasn't the most impressive last year, I'm not going to lie. But with Wes Godwin out, you also now have Tom Allen, a veteran presence on the defensive side of things, former Indiana head coach, former Penn State defensive coordinator. You're going to figure out now that how aggressive that defense can be. And I think that defense can really be aggressive with Tom Allen at the helm. I want to see how he sets the foundation for that defense, how aggressive they can be. And I heard in spring practice they were creating red zone turnovers. They were creating some good blitz packages there. And that defense in the red zone was looking really, really sticey and really, really, really stingy in the red zone, creating some big-time plays. So that's a good sign from what you're wanting to hear if you're a Clemson football fan, especially with the defense being a little bit struggling in that department last year. Can they develop that into real-time games? Can they do it and make big-time plays out of it? Can they be a physical presence and a physical defensive presence, Clemson, once again in college football? So, number one, how is the foundation going to be, and how is the new look defense going to look under Tom Allen during the spring and heading into the season? That's my number one point in the spring outlook. And what I want to see is how their defense is going to fare under Tom Allen heading into year one. That's number one. Number two, for me, I want to know, and this is just kind of this is honestly, if you want to talk about it, just if I can, try to pull it up. There we go. Who's going to replace Phil Mafah at running back? I think that's a real good question. I want to see what's going to happen with the running game. That's the point number two for Clemson that I got. Who's going to replace him at running back? And who's going to replace Phil Mafah at running back? You got guys who can do it, right? I think you got guys on this team that could probably replace him. You had the Phil Mafah and Will Shipley connection is no longer there for them. I think Adam Randall, graduate transfer, senior Adam Randall at running back could be the best bet. 225 yards, 6'2" running back. He's out of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Adam Randall's been been there all year, his whole career. If you remember Adam Randall, and I'll give you this, Adam Randall set up a big-time kickoff return to set them up to win the ACC championship game against SMU. That Adam Randall could be a big-time name in the running game to replace Phil Mafah. There, you also, you have Adam Randall. You have guys who are leaning off of him. Adam Randall could be a good threat. You have to me, I think Adam Randall's the best bet, but if you want to look at more, you can have freshman backs coming in. You got a freshman named Gideon Davidson, freshman running back from Lynchburg, Virginia. I think that's a good bet for you if you want to go a little bit younger, but Adam Randall seems to be the best bet to replace Phil Mafah at starter. But you got Gideon Davidson. I want to see what he does in the spring and how he can elevate the running game behind Adam Randall. So those are the two backs that I'm thinking about. But who's going to replace and take that leap to replace Phil Mafah? Last year we were talking about replacing Will Shipley. Now we're talking about replacing Phil Mafah, because Mafah was a good, solid back for this team. Who replaces Phil Mafah in the running game, and what are they going to do at running back? That's what I want to see from Clemson. I want to see how the secondary is going to do, especially because we're talking about the defense, right? Number three, what's that secondary going to look like even more? You got guys, honestly, we have young quarterbacks. You got Avian Terrell. You got Ashton Hampton still, at the helm for Clemson. You got Ashton Hampton and Avian Terrell at the helm for the secondary and cornerbacks. But the young cornerbacks, you got the young quarterbacks who can step up. I want to see who's going to step up at the secondary to help out Avian Terrell and Ashton Hampton in the fall and in the spring. I want to see the elevation of those young cornerbacks. That's my third. That's my third point out of Clemson, and that's my third point out of their outlook. And I will go to the outlooks really quick, and then I'll go to what Dabo Swinney said about Clemson in the spring before we move back into the SEC. So number one, how's the defense going to look? How's the foundation of that defense going to look under Tom Allen for Clemson? That's number one. Number two, who's going to replace Phil Mafah in the running game for Clemson? I want to see that out of their spring, and who's going to step up and make that leap at running back besides just Adam Randall. Maybe it's Gideon Davidson, maybe him. And then number three, to help out Avian Terrell and Ashton Hampton, what young corner in the secondary is going to step up and help shine as a young player in the secondary? That's my third outlook in all three outlooks and what I want to see out of Clemson in this spring. Like I said, they have April 5th is their spring game, and after that, they're done. Guess what? Non-televised, a non-televised spring game. Worried about worried about the tampering, worried about those things going on for Clemson. Non-televised spring game, and that's where a lot of people are going. They're either going to modify their spring games, they're going to either not televise them, or they're going to do the same thing. But a lot of them are going towards the OTA route, or they're going to do a spring game and just not televise it. So that is their spring game. Dabo Swinney is concerned, and that is where I'm going to go with this before we move on to Alabama's outlook and before we move on to LSU's outlook as well, because LSU's playing Clemson in their opening game, August 30th in Clemson, South Carolina. So let's talk about Clemson, what Dabo is concerned about. He thinks that they're not having a good spring, and it sounds like it in a lot of his pressers that they're not having a good spring. He doesn't think that the young corners, like I just mentioned, and this is why I mentioned as an outlook, I want to see the young corners elevate themselves and step up. He doesn't think that a lot of them are ready to play, and he is really concerned about that. Cade Klubnik has not really had the best spring either. He thinks he's kind of checked out, and he is worried about that. He is trying to get everybody together and, get a good opportunity for all of them to shape up and just do a lot better and head into the 2025 season a lot better than what they're doing. This was a couple of days ago. At a couple of days ago practices, they just weren't having the best. Cade Klubnik didn't have a very good day a couple of days ago. He just, he think this is a quote. He wasn't ready to go today, and maybe because he knew he wasn't going to get a lot of reps, and he was trying to rest Cade Klubnik. But this is quote from Dabo Swinney. Per credit goes to Clemson Sports Talk for that one. But he is ready. Excuse me. He is, he was thinking about that, and he was talking about, just how they just weren't ready and how they just didn't feel like they were prepared and were ready to go in the practices today. I think that's what he's worried about. I think that is a concern for a team coming off of an ACC championship and coming off of a playoff appearance. I think that they do need to step up and do look a lot better heading into the 2025 season. I think if that is the case, they do need to step up, look good heading into fall camp, because they have a huge game against LSU, home game against LSU, and season opening game against LSU, a very talented LSU team at that, and they need to shape up and get better heading into the 2025 fall camp and 2025 season. Tackling has been a little bit better, he thinks. He says He says there's been a huge emphasis in particular in space. That's why I mentioned the defense. I'm curious to see how the defense is going to look. I think everywhere else needs to improve, but the defense right now, the grade is starting to come into itself. I'm already doing a spring results, episode, before I do a spring results episode right now, I know, but what I'm hearing is like, Clemson needs to do a little bit better, but we will see. It's all in due time, but the defense is looking good. Cade Klubnik and the rest of the team need to kind of shape up. We'll see how it goes, but that's not me criticizing. That's me going off of what Dabo has said, per Clemson Sports Talk and per head coach Dabo Swinney himself. That is Clemson's outlook. We're going to see what happens in the spring results episode and how I will grade and how I think I should grade their spring based off of my opinion, right? Based off of my thoughts. So that is Clemson's outlook. Let's dive back into the SEC and talk about Alabama. Alabama heading into Kalen DeBoer heading into his second season as Alabama's head coach. Rather, don't get me saying LSU. We're going to talk about LSU here in a little bit, but golly, heading in to this season, second season as head coach of Alabama, we have a spring game on April 12th, right? Spring game for Alabama on April 12th, and it will not be televised. In a few weeks, not be televised. After that, their spring practice and their spring camp is over, and they will get ready for a summer and then fall camp. But Kalen DeBoer, you had Nick Sheridan as quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator. Then, all of a sudden, Ryan Grubb, your original name that you had heading into last year, went to the Seahawks. But then he got removed as the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. Now, you hired him back. So Ryan Grubb is the new offensive coordinator for the Alabama Crimson Tide heading into this year. So Alabama will have Ryan Grubb and will have the full-on Washington Huskies treatment from 2023 now, coaching staff treatment there in Alabama now. So Ryan Grubb will be the offensive coordinator for Alabama. Head coach Kalen DeBoer is back. You also got Nick Sheridan as quarterbacks coach, but he is also listed as co-offensive coordinator. And then you got Jamarcus Shepard, wide receivers coach, and also he is also listed as a co-offensive coordinator. So you have 3 offensive coordinators, and then you got defensive coordinator Kane Womack coming back for this team. Coaching staff, I'm curious to see how that's going to work out. I'm curious to see who's going to really call the plays. I'm pretty sure Ryan Grubb will call the plays, and then by title alone, Nick Sheridan will coach the quarterbacks, Jamarcus Shepard will coach the receivers, and then by title, they will be assistant to Ryan Grubb in the offense. So I think that's how it could work, but we will see. But I listed all this staff down as the keynotes here on our notes. April 12th is the spring game, and it will not be televised. Okay, so for Alabama, very interesting year last year in Kalen DeBoer's first year is they were undefeated. They looked a little bit wishy-washy in September. They blew the brakes off of Georgia. They injured, and then they went into the very next week they were the number 1 team in the country, and everybody's like, okay, Alabama's here. This offense is looking loaded. Jalen Milroe is playing like a madman. Kalen DeBoer is feeling good heading into October. Who can stop him? And then Vanderbilt stopped him. Vanderbilt versus Alabama. I remind you, our number 1 game of Frenzy's top 50 games of the 2024 college football season. Go back and listen to episode 204 very much, please, and thank you. That game kind of hit them with a dose of reality. They lost their first game, undefeated, and then they ended up coming against a team against South Carolina that was very good, but they didn't look good in that game at all. Then they survived South Carolina, and then they lost to Tennessee. They lost 2 games before November for the first time since 2007, and that was Nick Saban's first year as head coach at Alabama. That was honestly that was 17 years ago. That's a long time ago. I was 7 years old. Pigskin Frenzy wasn't even a thought in little Joel Norris's mind. And that is what happened with Alabama. So if you want to look at Alabama, then they ended up, playing Tennessee. They ended up going to November. They beat the brakes off of LSU. Everything's looking good there. Ended up playing Mercer, beat Mercer. And then all of a sudden they played Oklahoma a week before the Auburn game, and they got the brakes beat off them by Oklahoma in OU. It was in Norman. It was a horrifying game. They were on their way to the playoffs, it seemed. And then that game knocked them out. And then they went to the ReliQuest Bowl and lost to Michigan, the team that beat them and knocked them out of the playoffs and essentially retired Nick Saban in the Rose Bowl game. They played them again in the same calendar year, Michigan, and beat them on New Year's Eve. So it was crazy. It was all crazy. They went 9-4. It was their first season since 2007 under double-digit wins and more than 3 losses. So, and 4+ losses. So it was crazy. A lot of history was made and a lot of history was broken in Alabama's year. Alabama fans are not going to want to keep up with that too much longer. So what are we expecting to see from Alabama heading into this spring and heading into the 2025 college football season? Jalen Milroe is gone. The number 1 thing I want to see, honestly. And actually, this is going to be 2 things. So let's start off with we'll start off with Jalen Milroe and all that in the second point. Let's go to the first point first. How is Ryan Grubb's offense going to look heading into the spring season? That's number 1. The counterpart to that is it going to look any different than Nick Sheridan's offense? Or Jamarcus Shepard's, right? I want to see what Ryan Grubb does play calling wise and how it's going to expand everything and open up the playbook a little bit for Alabama's offense heading into the spring in 2025. I want to see what Ryan Grubb does and how he sets the firm foundation in his first year as Alabama's OC for the Crimson Tide. I want to see them have a bounce back here offensively. I think a lot of people, and no, you know what? Let me save that point for after my spring outlook. I want to see what Ryan Grubb does on this offense, and I want to see what adjustments and changes he can make with the players around him. Number 2, who is their quarterback? Who's going to take the leap at quarterback? Right now, it's looking like it's either going to be Ty Simpson or Keelan Russell, true freshman coming in for Alabama. Keelan Russell, a highly talented player for this Alabama Crimson Tide team. Look, you have guys like Ryan Williams around at sophomore, Daniel Hill at sophomore running back, Jeremy Bernard as a senior at receiver. You got guys on this team, Jalen Hale. You got a lot of guys on this team that can play good. You got Austin Mack who could be in there in the competition for quarterback, Rico Scott, redshirt freshman. I want to see out of Duncanville, Texas. He was a Texas Player of the Year in high school. Keelan Russell, can he be the guy that takes up the reins at QB1? I've been hearing a lot of good things about Keelan Russell and what he could do for this Alabama offense. And he looks like a true Kalen DeBoer type quarterback. And I want to see what Keelan Russell does under Kalen DeBoer's offense for Alabama and what he can do. Can Keelan Russell, the true freshman, 6'3", 192 pounds. He is a little bit on the smaller side with weight, but can he be a lethal weapon and lead this offense as a true freshman, as a freshman quarterback, and lead this team to be a powerhouse on offense? Or is it going to be him, or is it going to be the veteran Ty Simpson, or is it going to be Austin Mack, transfer from Washington, who is also a Kalen DeBoer guy, who's going to take that leap in the starting quarterback job and who can elevate themselves in the spring? I want to see those 3 quarterbacks shine and what they do to take over for Jalen Milroe and replace him heading into the 2025 season this spring. That's number 2. Number 3, I'm curious to see about their edge rushers. I'm curious to see what happens there. I think they got some solid. They do have some solid edge rushers, and particularly at linebacker with Kelby Collins. I think Kelby Collins coming in. Kelby Collins coming in from Florida was a good pickup there. He's an Alabama kid, but Kelby Collins coming in from Florida, he was a linebacker hybrid edge rusher from Florida. I think he's probably going to be the automatic starter and the automatic choice. But who else could step up on the edge for this team? You got Jahad Campbell, who is now going to the NFL. He was a primary edge rusher for this team. Who could step up there besides just Kelby Williams? Besides this is Deontay Lawson, a redshirt senior, and Kelby Collins coming in from Florida. Who can step up besides those guys to replace Jahad Campbell? Who's going to have some more extra help on the edge? I want to see that from Alabama. Those are the 3 things I want to see from Alabama. Number 1, what's Ryan Grubb going to do on offense? I'm not really worried about Kane Womack. I think he can do some better things this year, entering his second year. But number 1, I want to see the firm foundation in the playbook and then expand the playbook under Ryan Grubb and see what Alabama's offense is going to look like under that. Number 2, I want to see who's going to take the leap in the starting quarterback role between Austin Mack, Keelan Russell, and Ty Simpson. That's number 2 for Alabama. And number 3, who's going to help out Kelby Collins and Deontay Lawson on the edge, who are replacing a solid playmaker in Jahad Campbell. So that's my 3 main points in my Alabama spring football outlook. Again, their spring game is April 12th. It will not be televised. Their A-Day game is April 12th. It will not be televised, and they're making some moderate changes to that A-Day game to make it look like a more modified half scrimmage, but also half OTAs run through as well. So that's what it's going to look like for their spring game. Here's my main point about Alabama before I go over to the counterpart and go over to LSU to conclude this episode of Pigskin Frenzy. I think Alabama is a team that's very underlooked heading into the 2025 college football season. I think in the SEC, I think in period, as we do our conference standing projections, I currently have them pretty much higher on the list. I really do. I think they're going to be at least in the top 10 standings in the conference in our early conference standing projections. We're going to have that around June, most likely, late May, early June, but in the summer. I think that in the conference standing projections, Alabama's going to be in there. I think Alabama is a team that when you look at them, they have a lot of talent. I think they can come into their own, and I think this was only Kalen DeBoer's first year. Give it time. Give it time. Let's see what happens. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, Kalen DeBoer's going to win it all. I'm not saying that yet, but look, give it time. He's a solid football coach. He's got the plan together. He's got a whole bunch of talent on that team. So let's watch out for Alabama. I think they're being highly underlooked heading into the 2025 season. And it's been a long time since Alabama's been this underlooked heading into the 2025 season. Let's conclude our episode of Spring Outlooks, our Spring Outlook series here on episode 206 of Pigskin Frenzy. Let's conclude it with LSU. I've been talking about LSU a lot on this episode. I'm going to do a Spring Outlook on LSU. I need to. It is a make it or break it year for me, at least in my opinion, heading in for Brian Kelly, entering his fourth year as LSU head coach. Right? His fourth year as LSU head coach. They had to utilize that transfer portal, and they did. They had the number one transfer portal class right now, and they had to utilize it because they weren't utilizing it well enough to try to make a run at a title. And now they have the talent to where, hey, they could make a run for a title this year. They pulled an Ohio State, and I keep saying that. They pulled an Ohio State on what they did heading into the spring, heading into the fall, and heading into this 2025 season. When Michigan won the national championship in 2023, Ohio State was assembling a team. They brought back guys, and they got guys to come back to be as seniors, and then they brought guys from the portal, and then they recruited some guys, and they were like, you know what, we're coming in and we're going to win it all. What did Ohio State do? They won it all. They won the national championship. LSU's doing the same thing. LSU's doing the exact same thing. Garrett Nussmeier's back. You got guys like him here, he's back. You got Xavier Thomas. You have guys on the defensive side of things. You got guys like Harold Perkins coming back. Whit Weeks is back at the linebacker spot. You have guys like Mansour Delane coming in and through the portal. You have guys like DJ Pickett coming in through recruiting as a true freshman. He's making an immediate impact as a true freshman. You have guys like Joe Salone fired up. Blake Baker's fired up on the defensive side of things. You have Barry and Brown from Kentucky coming in. You could utilize him along with Aaron Anderson, who is also back. You got Xavier Thomas back, and you can switch him to a running back spot, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. You got Nick Anderson coming from Oklahoma, a solid playmaker at receiver who's tall enough to reach over guys' heads and corners' heads. You got him at receiver. You have Patrick Payton on the edge. You Jack Pryburn from Florida on the edge as well. You got a lot of guys on that defensive side of the ball, on the defensive side of the ball, and the offensive side of the ball that can make things work. A lot of talent through that portal, recruiting as well, and just a lot of guys. It's been a solid offseason building a roster to make a run of the playoff for LSU. It did not go good in 2024, it did go well. They made it to the Texas Bowl and beat Baylor on New Year's Eve, and they won 9 games. However, it's not where they want to be. They don't want to be 9-4. They want to be 10-2. They want to win 10, 11, 12 games in a season. They want to make the playoffs and try to fight for a national championship. Caden Durham in the backfield is back as well. The running game can be a lot more elevated, and there's a lot of questions that I got for LSU heading into this spring. But Brian Kelly boldly proclaimed, "We'll see you in the national championship." Can he back up those words and not let other people make him eat his words, right? Can he back up those confident words that he said in that Oklahoma post-game presser to end the season on? Can he back up those words? Recap of the season. I just did that. I just talked about the roster building. Head coach Brian Kelly. You also have, you have head coach Brian Kelly. You have you have head coach Brian Kelly. You have Joe Salone as an offensive coordinator. You have co-OC and wide receivers coach Cortez Hankton. And you got defensive coordinator Blake Baker. That's the main staff. You replace Bo Davis, you replace him. He went to the New Orleans Saints. It's a tough blow for the defensive line, but who do you get? You get Kyle Williams, somebody who's familiar with the LSU defensive line because he was a LSU defensive lineman way back when and former NFL defensive lineman. So he can build up and coach that D line. You got Brad Davis on the offensive lineman. You got a solid crop of offensive line talent with Solomon Thomas there. You got Josh Thompson from Northwestern. You just build a lot of the offensive line talent there. You got DJ Chester still there. You got Weston Davis there. You got a lot of guys on this team for Bo Borderland. You got a lot of guys on this team on the offensive line along with Josh Thompson that could make a run at it and protect Garrett and protect this offense and block here on the offensive front. So you got a lot of talent, like I said. So now let's see what they do and utilize it. Number one outlook that I want to see is the running game. Can we elevate the running game with Caden Durham, with Caleb Jackson? You can even put Jawan Johnson or Xavier Thomas and make them switch positions at the running back spot. You also got Trey Holly. You got guys like him there. You got guys like Harlem Berry who can make an immediate impact as the freshman at running back for this team. Can you elevate the running game, right? Can you elevate the running game? It wasn't a good season at running the football. Can you have a balanced offense and run the football a lot better in the spring and get it ready to run, get ready to run the football, right? Heading into the 2025 season behind superb O-line talent heading into this season. So that's number one. How's the running game going to look? Can we elevate the running game? Number two, and I'm going to sit there and say this, the development and the more confidence, right? And the explosiveness in the building of Garrett Nussmeier. Can we see him get even more confident and more developed? I think that there was a lot of games last year that he was good at, but a lot of games he was not good at. Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas A&M, and the big-time moments, where was Garrett Nussmeier? I think that's what we want to see. I want to see Garrett Nussmeier in the big-time moments make the big-time plays. Can he lead this offense to game-winning moments and to game-cinching moments that could probably, because they got some games this year that could turn their season upside down or strap a rocket to this LSU team and they're going straight to the Mars, right? With some of these games, Clemson being one, their opening game. They haven't won an opening game in years, since 2019, since Joe Burrow and this LSU team won the national title. Can they, win big games like an A&M, Texas A&M, like an Ole Miss? They beat Ole Miss, but can he play well in those games against a Clemson, against an Alabama? Can he win those type of big moments, a big time contest? Big time games this season on their schedule. Can Garrett Nussmeier come up big for this team? I'm not saying that he's got to have, he's got to have a perfect game every game. He can have a bad game because everybody's going to have a bad game, but when the big time moments are happening, he wasn't there in a majority of the moments. Can he be there in those moments and be more developed? That's what I want to see out of Garrett Nussmeier heading into the spring. And can he make some of those big time plays and look like the quarterback that Brian Kelly and this offense and Joe Salone wants him to be for this Tigers team? Now, number three, big time. And this is big time, right? Big time. How's the defense going to look even better? Is it going to look even better? Especially at the secondary spot. You got DJ Pickett. Some of these young freshman guys on the defensive side of things, I want to see how well they can look. They got a lot of guys who are coming in and who are a lot of guys who are going to be quite equipped, right, on the defensive side of things. You got Patrick Payton, Mansour Delane, Jack Pryburn, Harold Perkins, Whit Weeks, West Weeks. You got a lot of guys back, right? The defensive side of things, where like DJ Pickett on the secondary, how is that going to look? How is the secondary going to look even more elevated? How is it going to look? Are they going to be even better under Blake Baker? Now, a lot of it was they just got to recruit. A lot of guys were saying that. Kirk Herbstreit, a lot of guys were saying they just got to recruit. They got to go out there, recruit in the portal, recruit guys in high school recruiting. And they did that. They did that this year. I don't think there's any more excuses at this point. I think the defense needs to probably be a lot more elevated than it was. Definitely was in 2023 and more so in more so than it was in 2024. It was a lot better this past season or last season in 2024 than it was in 2023 because anything's going to be better than that. But can they be a top defense to where, oh, this is a stingy defense, you got to watch out for them and game plan around it? Can they elevate their defense even more? So that's the three outlooks that I got for LSU heading into the spring. Number one, the running game. Can they get a balanced running game going in this spring? I want to see it. Number two, the development of Garrett Nussmeier. Can he prepare himself for these big-time moments heading into the 2025 season? And then number three, the elevation of that defense. Can it be a lot better than it was, even more so than 2024? That's the three outlooks and the main outlooks and my outlook for LSU in the spring. They have no spring game. That's the only team out of our list that we talked about today that has canceled their spring game. Their National L Club game has been canceled. No spring game for LSU this year. They're just going to go on with OTAs at this point. March 8th, which is now, and they already had practices, and we're hearing a lot of good things about their team heading into the spring. And then April 12th, their last spring practice is April 12th, where they'll meet with the media and sign autographs for fans and have a fan day. And their team is looking really, really good in spring practices right now. The running game's looking a little bit better. Let's see about everything else, though. No spring game. Practices are March 8th through the 12th, continuing on until then. That was South Carolina Spring Outlook, Clemson Spring Outlook, Alabama Spring Outlook, and LSU Spring Outlook. And we are now out of time. So, guys, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage and some spring football and spring outlook coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple. All you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. X and Instagram at Pigskin_Frenzy. Follow, like the pages there. You're going to get episode updates, news and highlights from across college football. You're going to get trivia questions on Instagram stories. Go and answer today's college football question as well as all things to date for Pigskin Frenzy. Guys, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday. www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com is the website. Go and check that out for all things to date for Pigskin Frenzy. We will be back Thursday with more spring football coverage and more spring outlook coverage, continuing our spring outlook series. Guys, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, and Illinois. All Big Ten is on tap for Thursday's edition of Pigskin Frenzy for episode 207. You're not going to want to miss it. We're going to give our outlooks on the defending national champions, their rivals in Michigan, Oregon, and Illinois. All Big Ten schools. You're not going to want to miss it. This coming up Thursday as we give our spring outlooks and our spring outlook and our spring football coverage outlooks on them. And then until Thursday's continuation of our spring outlook series on Pigskin Frenzy, I'm Joel Norris signing off. We will see you Thursday. For everybody out there, we love you all. If you want to come to know Jesus Christ, who is our Lord and Savior for this show, because without him, we wouldn't be doing this show. We give him all the praise for this show. We thank him, and we are so blessed to be doing this show because of Jesus. Without Jesus, we would not be here and have the platform to do this show, Lord. To do this show. So thankful for our Lord and Savior Jesus. And if you want to come to know Jesus, contact me on all platforms, X, Instagram, and the website, and we will talk about you coming to know the Lord Jesus. We are so thankful for him. We're praying for you all. We love you all. As always, stay the course.